Hello and welcome everyone to the Friday, February 2nd, 2024 edition of the Contributor Comms team meeting. As a reminder, we do operate under a code of conduct, which essentially says to be respectful of your fellow speakers and attendees and generally be excellent to each other. To start things off, we are implementing a new process here to have everyone on the call introduce themselves really quickly before we kick things off. Totally optional. You do not have to do it. And I guess I'll go first. I'm Caslin Fields, and I'm a co-chair of the Special Interest Group for Contributor Experience, which this sub-project is part of. And I'm also one of the co-leads of this sub-project. Who would like to go next?
I'm Chris Short. I am a co-lead of this sub-project with Caslin, and yeah, I know where all the automation is. I think now, maybe.
My name is Ian Coldwater. I am a shadow here at Kubernetes Contributor Comms. I'm also SIG Security co-chair, and my pronouns are they, them.
Oh, that's a good point.
Yeah,
Let's also, part of the process that I need to add to my spiel, let's make sure to add pronouns after we introduce ourselves. She, her.
him, and continue, please.
Yeah, I might go. So I'm Fred. I'm a block coordinator for the SIG ContribEx comms team. I'm also part of the Kubernetes 130 release team, and my pronouns are he, him.
Would anyone like to go next?
Hi, I'm Mario Farland. I am part of SIG Infra and SIG ContribEx and SIG ContribEx comms. My pronouns are he, him.
Hey there, everyone. This is Avinash Tripathi, and I usually hang out in SIG ContribEx comms. Yeah, my pronouns are he, him.
Would anyone else like to introduce themselves?
Not, that's totally
Hey
fine.
folks, I am Sundipan Panda. I hope I am clearly audible.
Yes.
Yes, you are.
Thanks. I am a ContribEx comms member and just hanging out here and trying to be helpful. My pronouns are he, him.
Wonderful. Anyone else would like to go? I'll leave that open for a minute and we'll move on.
Hi everyone, I am Arjun and I am also hanging out here and my pronouns are he, him.
Welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining today. And thank you for bearing with us as we try out a new process. We're all figuring it out. Another thing that we're adding to our processes is a note taker. If anyone would like to volunteer to be a note taker today, we would appreciate it. Anyone interested?
This helps the meeting go, and does also
It is very
contribute.
helpful.
I can take notes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mario. I need to fix that so that it's not bolded in the template, I guess, because I just moved it. Alrighty, and with that, I think we are good to dive into our agenda. All right, so we've got a couple of things in our agenda before we dive into the board. First off, in new items, I did want to mention something from the SIG ContribEx main call, bi-weekly call, which was, and also that's been going on Slack a little bit, but contributor summit processes. So SIG Contributor Experience owns running the contributor summits that we usually do at each KubeCon. These are essentially, they have been at least co-located events at KubeCon that are only open to contributors. Quite a few members of our team have gotten involved with these over the last couple of years. It's an event and it has its own set of leads. And one of those leads is comms. And one thing that we've been talking about quite a lot over the last couple of them is that the comms role needs a bunch of like structure around it and clarity around how you pick up that role and run with it. And contributor comms, us as a team, we should aim to support that role. We don't have to have someone from our team in that role, which means that we need to have processes for when it's someone who's not familiar with our group or our processes, how we reach out to that person and offer them the tools that we have available to us. One of those being the Slack bot. So access to the Slack bot, which the purpose of is to be able to send a message out to many Slack channels at once. Access to that is handled by a list, an alias of Slack users, which is, I think it's the contributor comms list, right? Is that the name of the list? Is that the, I'll have to look into GitHub.
The Slack bot is anyone in at contributor comms can use it. So yeah.
Yeah, so I think it's the list of people under list of users in that alias.
Yeah, it's the user group itself that matters.
So naturally, if the comms lead for the contributor summit is someone who's not part of our group, they're not going to be part of that list. So this is one example where we would need to reach out to that person and say, hello, thank you for doing comms for the contributor summit. We are the contributor comms team and we're here to help. We do things in these places. And as part of your role, you'll need access to some of them. So we're going to set that up for you. It is probably what the process will be. So it'll probably be part of the process that we add the comms lead to that list for that cycle and then maybe remove them at the end if they're not going to continue doing comms work. Yeah, and there may be other things like that we're trying to figure out. So I wanted to let folks know about that. Does anyone have any questions or comments about that kind of new project that we'll be figuring out?
I just want to say that I took a note to actually diagram this process because it's not like it jumps between SIG infra and comms, right? So it's some stuff is over in the infra land, some stuff is over in a, SIG config or Slack config repo someplace else. So yeah, like figuring out all the permissioning for that bot and getting it diagrammed should help everybody involved.
That's something we've needed for a long time.
Yeah.
Mario has his hand up.
I would also argue that the person that is appointed for the day of ops for monitoring Slack should maybe be added to this, because if there's something important happening, I mean, I guess most of the stuff is just in the summit channel, which is fine, but maybe some important thing is coming up that should be rolled out eventually. So either this, I mean, there was the idea to have a dedicated person that is just monitoring Slack for on day of ops.
That kind of makes sense. Yeah, I understand that there could be a wider need to send out messages other than Summit channels, right? Like I could see that happening to where it's like we need to send something to Summit, contributor experience, and another place, right? Like during the session. Like, hey, the Hugo site hacking thing's happening now. Like that could get announced elsewhere and folks could come. That would be cool.
Maybe.
Maybe.
I feel like any comms that need to go to multiple channels in Slack for the contributor summit likely should be handled by comms, the comms lead of the contributor summit. But if it's on site and we want to send messages out on Slack, is that too big of an audience? Because there's not, like, considering the number of people who are in Slack, it's a relatively small percentage of them who are actually on site at the contributor summit. And there's also the contributor summit channel in Slack where it makes the most sense to post those things. So I think it doesn't make sense to post day of ops stuff about the contributor summit in channels beyond the contributor summit ones, because it's such a small portion of that audience. And if we did want to post things to other channels, then it should be handled by the comms lead, is my thinking.
That's a good point. Day of ops doing comms, you're going to be kind of new, fresh, and that might be an extra hurdle.
Yeah. The idea of the comms lead is that they should already be aware of these types of considerations of like who's in which channel and which audiences a message needs to go to. And so they should be able to help with those kinds of things. But the comms lead also is not required to be on site. So, but they should have at least a shadow or something on site to be able to handle on-site requests. But we should probably document things that way, I think, rather than giving individual leads within the contributor summit access to comms channels. Because if we did, it would be all kinds of chaos. Cool. We can talk about that more in the contributor summit meetings too. There's a whole bunch of roles. It's not just the comms role that are trying to solidify their processes and handbooks in the contributor summit. Any other questions or comments about this kind of project we'll be figuring it? I think it won't affect most members of our group, but I do want folks to know that like we will be bringing someone temporary into the fold with a lot of our tools on a regular basis. And folks are discussing in the chat kind of the logistics of how we would manage the Slack bot access for a temporary.
Yeah, just to put into words,
thing.
Avinash asked if we could create a new role that is restricted to just the Slack bot for this. And yes, we totally can, but we would have to set that all up back through the automation process, which again isn't exactly well diagrammed or documented. Although SIG and for swears it's well documented. So yeah, I don't know. For me, it's easier to just be like, here's the person, hashtag or #, whatever you want to call it, remove after KubeCon in a 2024, whatever date, you know.
Yeah. I also don't think there's really restrictions that we want to put on the comms lead when we add them temporarily, because they're going to need access to like all of our social media platforms. So I've added the comms lead this time to Buffer, and they have access to post on whatever they want to. Well, they have needs approval access right now, and I told them that I can give them direct posting access when they're comfortable with that if they want it. And if we leave them, that's another part of the process that we need to figure out, is if we add the comms lead as needing approval on their social media posts, then that means they have to work more closely with us to make sure that someone from our group is able to review their posts. And if there's someone who's not very familiar with social media posts, that's probably a good idea. Though if they are comfortable, then we might want to give them full posting access so that they don't have to ask us when they want to post something about the contributor summit. So we'll have to figure out what we want the process to be there. If we always want them to ask for our approval, just to make sure there's another check for them, a service that we can
that's
provide.
probably, I mean,
Better.
we need each other's approval.
It's true. Yeah.
So
Yeah,
like,
it's
just
very
like
rare
handing
that
the
I,
reins
like-
to somebody and having them go outside of existing process and have that person be an unknown quantity seems, you know, if we're posting without approval, that I feel like calls for looking into how we do things in general.
You got a good point there.
Even
Imagine the
I
security
don't-
person.
Yeah, like even I don't go into Buffer and post directly without telling someone or having somebody proofread it, right? Like
That's true. It's scary.
Yeah,
We have
like
some power in there.
right, like we could easily screw up messaging and cause some chaos. So I think it'd be wise to just still have that approval step and then increase the number of folks that can approve.
I like that. That's why we say these things out loud.
Could also do like a shift thing, like if we're worried about timeliness of like, okay, well,
Right.
between the hours of noon and 4, Caslin is on top of paying attention to Buffer, and between the hours of 4 and 8, I'm on top of paying attention to buffer, you know.
Yeah. And
It gets
I can
tricky with
totally,
Europe, though.
yeah,
I
I can
mean,
totally do early AM stuff. You know, if it's urgent, I'll probably already be up, right?
I can also take a look at that for Europe. So
yeah, I
The
mean, we have a spread out folks now. I think
we
for
do.
most of the globe. I think the only thing that is missing is Eastern Asia.
However, currently only the comms lead has approval access on buffer, which is not a globally distributed role currently.
That's a good point, right? Like that's all managed in buffer.
So we might want to implement a new role where the comms lead like designates people around the globe who could handle this, but we might not always have people. That opens up some interesting questions here.
You know, an on-call schedule for comms is probably something we should consider.
Maybe
It's
if we're big
rare.
enough.
It's
We are a pretty big
rare that,
group.
you know, it's usually event-based or, you know, activity-based. There wouldn't be a lot of pings. But
Yeah.
it would be, yeah, we do need to update the group, Santa Pan. You're absolutely right. I saw some old names in there, I think, yesterday. So,
We really need to be better about doing that on a schedule.
yeah.
Adding
So,
some
yeah.
process around the contributor summit could do that for us, actually, because we'll have to go in and do that at least twice a year, probably 4 times, or at least 3 to remove person. Well, maybe 2.
Oh, with 3 CubeCons, you know.
Oh, yeah, plus, yeah, I didn't think about that. If we
Yeah,
do a
because
contributor summit at KubeCon India, it also sounds like they're still doing KubeCon China, but it's in
I
Hong
didn't
Kong
even know,
this time.
I was about to say, I didn't even know there was a China still.
Oh, yeah. So for some context for people, just because I love KubeCon and Kubernetes history,
Oh, gosh.
there has been, since before the pandemic, there has been a KubeCon Shanghai. It was always in Shanghai when it was in China. And there were, I don't know, 2 or 3 of those before the pandemic. And then it stopped during the pandemic. And then it started back up last year. They did one in Shanghai, but it was much smaller. They announced it really close. And then it sounds like this is another thing that people garnered from the prospectus instead of like any announcements from the CNCF. It seems like they're doing one in Hong Kong this year. So there are going to be 4 this year, it sounds like. And 2 of those, like they haven't, you said they announced the dates. So they've at least announced something about KubeCon India. They haven't announced anything about KubeCon Hong Kong if they're going to do that. So I don't know. This year's going to be crazy.
Yeah. I mean, for China in general, Twitter's blocked, right? I imagine several Mastodon instances
That's
are blocked
true.
as well. So, like, those folks can lean on us for like guidance, but they're already going to have like the accounts, I think, on the various social networks in China. So,
It's a good point.
that's a tough
If
one.
we're thinking about regional branches of contributor comms, do we need to solicit and try to create a contributor comms China? I've heard that the Chinese KubeCons are not as big.
No, they're not.
Yeah. And the contributor summits there tend to be locally run. Even more so than the others are, so.
Correct.
Yeah, when I did the CFP, the time that I did for KubeCon China, I think there were 13 submissions total.
Huh.
Mm.
Wow.
Like a lot
For your
smaller.
track. Yeah. That is an order of magnitude smaller.
So small.
To be fair, that was a while ago, so it might be big. But it was like, you know, at the time there were already like multiple hundred submissions into like KubeCon main.
Yeah. That's more than an order of magnitude smaller, arguably. This conversation turned out to be much more than I thought it would be. I thought it'd be like an FYI, we're going to figure this out. And we've come up with a lot of interesting things here. So thank you all for contributing to this discussion. anything else we want to talk about with the contributor summits? We're already about halfway through our meeting, so we might want to move on and
let's
kind of
push ahead.
ruminate on these thoughts. Chris and Ian, we should discuss on Slack further, at least, maybe just in the comms channel publicly about some of the like comms lead role considerations that we were talking about here. Let's continue on Slack. At least do a DM.
All right.
As we think about it. Thank you.
I am temporarily distracted by my kid, so if anybody
All
needs me
good.
specifically for anything, just be like, Ian, and then I will eventually be like, huh?
Sounds good. I think let's move on to the next thing. Well, I guess one more thing before I move on from that. Avinash mentioned that having some representation from folks in the team in the China region is generally a good idea, which I do agree with.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah. Something for us to think about. If we want to make that happen, we may have to reach out to folks and make it clear that we want that to happen. So we will continue to think about these things. Let's move into updates, big wins, though. First one, Chris is behind on everything somehow, which is not particularly big news to me, but I feel that way all the
Everything that I said I was
time.
going to do this week didn't happen. So, yeah.
Is there anything in particular that you're worried about, or just like letting folks know if there
No.
is anything, let you know again?
No, not right now. It's all diagramming and contributor site stuff. So, yeah. Which, oh crap, I should point out that there's been a whole conversation about Hugo folks organizing somehow. I did want to mention that here and potentially discuss it in comms
Oh,
channel.
right. Yeah.
Because, Docs has tons of Hugo experience and they're here to offer their guidance, but not
Thank you, Maria,
necessarily
for taking notes.
take control of Hugo. So having some folks that are like, hey, we need to do X on this site and it's urgent, not urgent. Same thing we're talking about with like on-call schedules, right? Like, I don't think the contributor site needs that, but if somebody's like, oh, a new version of Hugo just dropped, why don't we upgrade it now as opposed to waiting until you finally have time? So yeah. And I know Mario had some other thoughts on this, so go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so I think we desperately need some update of the contributor site because I think the Hugo version is from 2020.
Yep.
I know
And
that
for a little bit of context on that, and we can't update it because of some customizations that we have there, and we have a working session at each contributor summit to try to address this.
Yeah, and the problem is that we basically have we have an old, or there was an update tried by Gphy to update Hugo and Doxy, and Bob did in the beginning some hacky implementations which were necessary. And this basically then backfired in the normal update process. So the update is still open because Gphy, of course, does not have too much time to work on this. Basically, it's always like, yeah, in between conference hotel rooms. Let's put it this way. And there was the recommendation from, or the suggestion from Bob to say, maybe it would be better to just kick the old website and build it anew with the current version of Hugo.
That's
and Doxy.
I've done that numerous times with Hugo sites, to be honest with you, right? Like, I've even
it usually also makes more sense. We did the
Yeah.
same thing for KCP, basically, because it is easier than to update.
It's easier to just build a fresh one than it is to update an existing one usually once they get super crufty. And that's just something from Hugo, right?
Yeah. And the idea would be basically to say, we take the contributor website into comms, which I think makes sense. because it is more or less a comms channel. And then also there would be the next flyover or corresponding thing, because there is a shadow position inside for the contributor summit for the website, where basically people are doing changes to the website for the contributor summit, and then they so comms contributor summit then has another thing that we can just basically hand them over. And I did most of the changes this year for the contributor website, so I can basically write down a guide what needs to be changed if a new contributor summit is coming up, and what you need to do. So for so that we basically can give this out to all of the folks. I'm happy to help there, but to be honest, time-wise, it will be after KubeCon.
And this, yeah, that's usually the answer.
I have a doubt. Sorry. I likely misunderstood the scope here, but are you also mentioning that by taking more ownership, etc., would the submission process, the way that blogs get published, etc., would that be different from the way it is right now?
Shouldn't
Which
be.
is essentially done by
No.
DocStream? No.
all the same.
Okay. So it's on the technical side. Okay, excellent. Yeah.
Yeah,
It's
it's all behind the
basically just-
scenes. Yeah.
Yeah, it's basically just
Thank you. Because that would be something interesting to discuss with it's a different topic, but we even toyed with the idea of a CFP around this, or at least a conversation with the docs team around the process of articles that get mirrored and the way to go forward and avoid dual reviews with mismatch content. It's a completely different one. So sorry, Mario, please go on.
I was finished basically. So basically, the proposal would be the contributor website goes into comms, and we are there for yeah. There's a new update. I mean, we also have a bot that can basically watch if there's a new update for Hugo, so that the website is not as neglected anymore. And there are a lot of issues that also need to be cleared if they are still valid. Like, we want to have more information in the footer, and I think the most interesting people to decide this are in comms, because they know, hey, we should add the LinkedIn page to the footer. Hey, we should add the Kubernetes IO thing to the footer and stuff like this, because we can basically then organize all of the channels there.
Yeah, and there's nothing stopping anybody from doing the work themselves right now. It's just there's no like official owner, it feels like sometimes, even though I know it's under ContribEx. So yeah.
And I more or less already recruited someone from our company to help with the rewrite.
Nice. Awesome.
Love it. Excellent. And as part of this, Mario, we had also been discussing you taking over the tech lead role. You want to go ahead and put in a PR for that? Which also reminds me that I didn't review the PR that was in last week that
Yeah,
to fix the SIG spotlight list.
I don't know if I should put up the PR or if you should put up the PR. That is the only process that I do not know.
Ooh, good point.
We don't have a specific strict guideline on this. I think I personally prefer I would like to imagine that I prefer the person taking on the lead role makes the request and then the leads approve or deny it. You know?
It's fine
So,
for me. That's
yeah.
fine for me. And I can also then take care of the update for the comms Slack user group. And the only thing is that you should review if this represents the folks.
I think let's go with that. Yeah. I think that's a good process. If someone requests a role that they are not ready for, then we can reject it and say, hey, I see that you're interested in this role. Let's talk more. So I like that process of people being kind of volunteering themselves for these things rather
Yeah.
than us voluntelling them. Yeah, I do like that better. As a matter of process, we should probably document that. Moving on. So in the SIG ContribEx meeting this week, Bob did give us an update on the Kubernetes.io Twitter situation, and you might be interested in this part if you're able to pay attention. I think you were on that call actually, right? Or were you not?
Chairs and tech leads has a standing conflict for me, so I was
It was
not.
SIG
Oh, okay.
ContribEx,
Well, I was
but I
not in
think
it
you were
then.
not on that.
Tell me
Yeah.
about it.
I can't remember who was on meetings at the end of the week. But yes, so Bob gave us an update. The update is that we asked the CNCF, said, hey, this account hasn't been active since April. We've heard that it might be up to projects to own their own Twitters now.
Yeah.
Is that the case? Do you want us to do that? I don't know if that was how it's worded, but that's how it's worded in my head. And the CNCF went, what hasn't been active for how long?
Oh no.
So
I love this part. What do you
it sounds
mean?
like that was handled by a contractor,
Oh.
and
Mhm.
no one noticed that that ball had gotten dropped along the way. That
Okay.
somehow that contractor's priorities got shifted, or someone left, or who knows what happened. But the contractor dropped the ball on that, and the CNCF is trying to work out what happened and how they're going to fix it.
Oh my goodness. Okay.
Wow.
Yeah.
So
And so
special.
fixing it does not just involve like handing it over to the people who are responsible for doing communications.
Not necessarily. So it sounds like they are up for like a joint thing, but they still want to have some hand in it.
Sure.
But they're still working it out. What I've heard is that they are open to us taking some role in that, and they're trying to work out what that looks like. Because previously, access for that contractor was handled through Twitter Together, I think.
Mhm.
And
No,
yeah.
not Twitter Together, just TweetDeck.
Oh, TweetDeck. Sorry. Yeah, that's the
Yeah.
one. Words. And we know the issues with TweetDeck. So
Mhm.
because that is a paid thing now, and they're probably not going to use that. So they're going to have to figure out a new tool, which I think we said, excuse us, have you considered Buffer too in the SIG ContribEx meeting? But we'll see how they end up deciding to handle the teams that are able to access that account. That's basically where we're at.
Okay.
I think also Bob said that he still have access if he would pay for TweetDeck.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
I
he
think
did
he
say
said.
that. No one should be forced to pay for anything, to do anything in this project. That's just my standing order.
Yeah, no,
So,
individuals should be forced
no,
to at least. Yeah.
never, no.
Any questions, comments, especially Ian, since this is something we're trying to work out?
I mean, yes, but
Not for us, right?
yeah, let me form them properly.
Yeah. And we'll probably need to go through Bob and talk with CNCF. We
Yeah.
may want to have a deeper discussion on Slack so that we can get the right questions to the right people.
Okay.
But yeah, feel free to ask here as well as you
All right.
formulate.
Thank you for the update.
Yes. Thank you for joining our group to help us with in-user comms. We do still have the LinkedIn account. And Josh did
use
connect
it.
us. Yeah, that has been used now for a message about the contributor summit. Josh also connected us with someone who he knows who is very into communications on LinkedIn to provide their insights on how to use the platform. So that conversation is going on in the comms channel on Slack. So there is that element of end-user comms that is still going. I still think we're going to take on more end-user comms responsibility, but this will be a little bit weird.
Okay.
I have one related question to this.
Yes.
Have we done any like announcement or something that the official Kubernetes project has taken over the LinkedIn page of Kubernetes, and you can go ahead and follow that kind of stuff,
We have
or we
not
can do
yet.
that.
I think we
No.
probably do want
We-
to, but go
yeah,
ahead,
we
Chris.
kind of need to think of a LinkedIn strategy because it is such a unique network now.
Yeah, I agree.
I mean, just for context, right? Like, right now, the two hottest places to watch videos are YouTube and LinkedIn, at least in tech, right? In our industry. So, yeah, in that order. Twitch is like falling
According
off.
to whom?
Just general stats that I've seen from our social media teams here in AWS.
Which is something to consider. Yeah,
I
I think
that changes all the time too. So like, just keep that in mind.
Yeah. I think the point that LinkedIn is a very unique audience is an important thing for us to consider before we announce that we've taken it over. We want to have an idea of what kind of content we're going to post on there and how we're going to post it before we say, hey, go follow us on LinkedIn, so that when we do that announcement, we can also say, here's the kind of stuff you can expect there, is my line of thinking. But we could also do an announcement and then later say, like, here's what we post on LinkedIn. So something
We
for
could
us to
just say,
consider.
hey, we have this. It will be a place where we continue to share information, just like Twitter and Mastodon, and then we can get more granular with it later.
Yeah, sooner is probably better than later.
But we also have to get it into Buffer before we probably do any of that.
I'm glad you mentioned the stun fund so that we can think through it. Mario has a hand up.
Yeah, one thing that I mean, the proposal for our working session for KubeCon is basically the content plan. So maybe, I mean, it's not limited to this, but we need to put in something, right? For our working session. So we basically put in this. So maybe this would be a good idea to, chat about this at KubeCon and do the announcement at KubeCon, more or less.
That'd be cool.
That's not a bad idea.
Yeah. I like that.
It is uncomfortably close. You all know that's in like.
Don't. Just
Okay.
don't.
Yeah.
Because I'm taking vacation and everything, and then there's gonna be that, and it's a thing.
Oh man. Let's move on to our next item. We'll continue talking about end user comms. We'll definitely talk about it next week. We should probably talk about it more on Slack. Actually, we should talk about this. We only have 13 minutes left in the meeting, but real quick, we probably should send out something. I guess do we want to announce? We'll figure this out later. I was trying to figure out if we want to send out an email earlier than later, but it's not like it'll change things dramatically. But we can put KubeCon, pre-KubeCon stuff on LinkedIn, so we might want to go ahead and send an announcement. Let's talk about it more on Slack. But let's move on since we only have 12 minutes left. Contributor summit proposal. Sorry, I did not review that. I promised I was gonna edit it slightly and then I didn't. I could do that after this meeting if I remember long enough. Everything leaves my mind after this meeting though.
I will
Did you want to say anything else?
Yeah. Officially it ends tonight.
Oh, really? Oh
Yeah,
yeah, it's
it's
February 2nd.
2nd.
How does that work?
Groundhog's
Sorry about
Day.
that.
Here it is again.
Oh, yeah, please ping me because everything leaves my mind after this meeting. After this meeting, it's like, and the week is done, but it's still Friday.
I'm actually leaving this meeting to play golf. So yeah, it pretty much is.
Yeah. Last thing in the notes before we move into the board, which hopefully we can get through fairly quickly, is also something that will be in the board, but I wanted to mention it here because it's been in our Slack channel. Arujwal is doing a great job of making progress on the SIG Cloud Provider Spotlight. So I wanted to call that out and thank you for your work on that.
That's awesome. Thank you.
He went ahead and sent questions and already got some responses. So moving forward. Thank you, Arujval. And I think Arujval is on. So if you want to say anything about it, feel free.
Yeah, like I just got a response from Brigitte that she will also give her responses. So then we will.
Yeah, Bridget Cromhout. Always a good voice to have. That'll be fantastic then. You should probably the questions, I added a couple of optional additional questions for you. If you're gonna have two people's text, it will make it longer. So I don't know. Take or leave those. They're totally optional.
I actually got responses from Elmiko on that questions.
Nice. They seem very responsive, so thought that might happen. Very good. I'm glad you're able to make progress, and thank you for taking that on and running with
Yeah,
it.
thank you.
And we have a bunch of other spotlights in progress, and let's talk about those as well. First one, SIG release. Is Nitish on today? He was on for a minute, I think, but I think he's dropped off. Federico, have you heard any updates? He was going to split SIG release into two blogs via the sub projects. I don't know if he's still working on one of those. I think he's supposed to do another one at some point. I think that was only one. I'm going to assume so. Let's move on. Any updates on the SIG infra? That's Bishal. I do this every time. I still haven't checked in. I'm going to move that one to do since he hasn't been on so long. Maybe?
No, I don't have any updates from it from last week. I've probed around but didn't actually have any update.
Cool. SIG architecture.
Yeah.
Going, Federico?
Sorry, give me 1 second.
Yeah, take your time.
Where am I? Yeah. So SIG architecture, there's movement. So I've discussed this with at least with one of them, with Gordon, that proposed that we actually have a live kind of conversation so that we can advance in this, because doing this the other way is not working. So I'm going to check our calendars and proceed with that, and then convert it into text.
Sounds good. Sometimes that's how it goes.
Yeah.
I appreciate you pushing on it and finding a way. The next one is also the book reading club, which is going to be published by the end of January, right?
Well, perhaps not published by the end of January, unless we enter the TARDIS, but there's movement as well. So Carlos has replied. I've already converted it into a Markdown. We're currently already reviewing the Markdown version in HackMD, adding, discussing like picture and stats and final touches there. So the bulk of the content is done, and we've agreed in opening the PR next week, with the publication date of the other one, give or take a couple of days, depending on the review process.
That's awesome. I'm glad that you've been able to make some progress on that, and they've started having meetings again. I actually went to the one last week. It's very interesting.
Yeah.
I'm excited to see the blog post about it.
I'm going to, this is from relatively recent. I've just finished the Markdown stuff yesterday, but I'm going to share this as usual in our Slack. Okay, so anyone can review it, suggest things, etc.
Cool. Sounds good. And you also have another one, SIG API Machinery,
which I'm I've wrote the questions, and I still haven't arranged for a date, but I will do so this week. So they are on board. I have the questions there. We just need to give it a couple of weeks so that we can get the content. So I would say that this has an estimate time of around end of February, early March.
Ooh. I also love the way that you worded it in this issue. One of the missing SIGs.
Indiana Jones and the missing SIG.
I like that it implies that someday maybe we will actually do all of the SIGs.
No, that's
I like that ambition.
guaranteed the target. So yes.
Yeah. Quite the undertaking.
Not to derail conversation, but I do wonder if we should do like a video or more video content in general of this is how you can contribute to comms, you know.
And now that we have LinkedIn, maybe that's something we should prioritize higher. Maybe we should knock on Bart's door and see if he wants to come help.
That could be fun.
And we briefly discussed this before, and with LinkedIn, I think this solves quite a few of the issues that we detected back then. When we release a spotlight or a conversation, etc., maybe we could highlight it in a small 1-minute video, 2 minutes video, whatever, even sometimes with the other person being interviewed. So increase the exposure by creating some more multimedia content.
Use the content more than once is like a marketing mantra.
Absolutely. We have 4 minutes left. Next one is SIG Node, which is Arpit, and Arpit is on today. Any updates?
Yeah, so I messaged the SIG chairs about the status, and they're kind of busy, so they are filling the doc slowly.
Excellent. That's often how it goes with these. And like I said, with some of the others, really appreciate you pushing on that and being persistent with it. If you need any help, just let us know. Thank you. And the next one is cloud providers, which we already talked about. So I'm going to skip that one. SIG security. Any updates on that? Sriram was interested in taking it up. Sriram is not on today. Cool. So we'll do
it's on that.
Perfect. I figured. Well, we can chat about it in Slack or just next week. Okay. No huge rush unless you think there's something that we should try to make sure it's out to promote or anything like that. Anything top of mind, Ian?
I appreciate you checking in about that. Not off the top, but
cool.
I can bring that question back to the SIG meeting next time.
Yeah, that's a good idea because the SIG meeting will be next week, right?
I think so. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, we might want to put that on the agenda. I would write that down, but we should move on. Help wanted. Oh, this kind of dropped off the face of the earth for a minute. So Mario had gone through and grabbed the timestamps, which are already getting quite stale. We were going to go through and make posts about it. We were having folks assign themselves. I think it's not visible enough. We should put this link in the Slack channel and still try to do some of these. But realistically, I bet a lot of them will not get done until this is not the right one. Realistically, I think a lot of them will not get done until after KubeCon. I'm going to grab this link and put it in Slack right now. That's worth the few seconds it will take to do, I think. Excellent. All right. I put that in there with no context. That was not helpful. I'll do it again later. Cool. So what's going to need to happen with that? This is not the right one. What's going to need to happen with that is folks are going to need to claim those, to own them, and then ask the SIGs about what's going on to update that and write a social media post and get that in. And let us know that it needs to be reviewed. So there's a number of steps here. We only have a minute left, so I'm going to move on from that. We can discuss it more on Slack. Establishing a process to prevent duplication of LWKD articles. Mario, do you have any quick updates on that?
Yeah, some progress, but not so much. I think that in 2 weeks, when our code freeze is in place for Cubomatic, I have more time.
Sounds good. The next item is set up LinkedIn on Buffer, which I still have not put in the request for yet. Sorry about that. I need to get that done. I've thought about it several times this week. Haven't gotten it done yet. And then Zapier. Is there anything you want to specifically call out real quick, Chris?
Sorry, no.
Cool.
My
We did talk
Zapier's
about it
broke,
in SIG
but
ContribEx too.
yeah, my Zapier's broke, but that's not relevant.
Cool. We'll talk about it more next time. Ooh, darn it. Sensitive communications process. Did we talk about this last time? We
No,
talked
and
about it in SIG ContribEx.
I just remembered that I needed to work on that outline, and
Oof.
yeah,
We are at time, so if you need to drop, do, but we're going to do an update on this real quick.
yes. So I need to just sit down and write out what I think is the good process, an outline of that, and then present that in the next meeting. So I need to jump on that before next Wednesday.
Yeah, and the security meeting will be next week too, so that's a good week to make some progress on this.
Uh-huh. But yeah.
Thank you for
that's all I
joining,
got.
Avinash. Yeah. So we can also post updates on that in the Slack if we have anything urgent, but I don't think we'll have anything until at least next week's meeting. We should put the link to that doc in. Apparently there's an issue for this already.
Yes,
So
there is.
we should go ahead and put the link to that doc in here, or maybe not. I don't know.
Yes.
But
once
that's
I
it
find
for our in progress items. There's a number of to-dos. If you are looking for something to do in our group, please post in our Slack and we'll take care of that there. You can also speak up now because I have some extra time today. Any last minute items that folks want on the recording before we say goodbye to our friends on YouTube? All right, I'm going to go ahead and stop the recording then. Bye, YouTube.